I remember I came home from a drama rehearsal. Mum and dad were sitting it was in this room that I'm sitting in now. They were sitting here with a glass of water. And it's one of those things, like, I honestly thought I was going to get absolutely roasted for something I'd done. Like, I thought, okay, mum, dad, my brother, all here. I've done something. I'm getting roasted. And a mum sat me down. She said, like, there's something we need to tell you. And she was like, Michael. And as soon as she said his name, and I kind of saw the faces of the three of them, I remember getting up, and it just like, it's kind of like you're holding onto a railing and you start to realize you're about to lose it. And you just know I'm about to lose it. And it was like that realization that I knew what she was going to say.
It's a strange thing to lose someone close to you to suicide and to have that tragedy put you on a path to purpose. It's what happened to me, and it's also what happened to Varad, whose life has been shaped by the death of his friend at the start of university, something he still feels guilty about to this day.
The book of our friendship had so many beautiful pages, and it was almost like, as the reader, it was gathering so much momentum. You're thinking, what's the next chapter going to hold? And it just feels like the rest of that book was just left empty.
Varad's now a volunteer youth mentor who facilitates mental health workshops for students in Western Australia. Our conversation is about culture, mateship, loss, grief, guilt, and the signs we wish we'd known enough to spot. This is Varad Mukhedkar's story.
Welcome to Young Blood, the award-winning volunteer podcast dedicated to young men's mental health. My name's Callum McPherson, I'm a journalist, and this is a platform for everyday men to share lived experience stories and show that no matter what you're going through, you're not alone. Suicide is the #1 killer of young people, and changing that starts with speaking up. So let's do it.
If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss a thing. Help us reach more people by taking 10 seconds to give the show a rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you've got some feedback on this conversation, I'd love to hear it. You can vote in the poll and leave a comment on every Spotify episode. I read them all.
This episode is proudly sponsored by NB&A Group. NB&A has a single focus: to support and guide people on their path to recovery from injury and illness, whether it's mental health or physical education programs, treatment or restoration following injury or illness. They can put together the right services for education, recovery, and return to work. Learning mental health first aid is as essential as physical first aid. This training supports people to spot the signs, have the confidence to provide initial help, and guide a person towards support. It's about learning to listen, reassure, and respond to the warning signs of depression, anxiety, psychosis, and substance use, potentially preventing a crisis. Check out their training and recovery options and services at nbassociates.com.au or Google NB&A Group. This show touches on some tough topics that may provoke strong emotions. If you find anything in this chat distressing, please do whatever you need to do to look after yourself.
Varad, to start off with, tell us a bit about your cultural background.
My family's originally from India. Really proud of my Indian heritage, but yeah, grew up in Perth, WA. Was born in New Zealand, so family moved here in 2004. But yeah, look, love Australia, grown up here, but also massive fan of cricket and Bollywood, and I think that kind of makes the biggest connection I've got to my culture.
I saw a few photos on your social media of you in dressed up and doing some Bollywood sort of stuff. So it looks pretty cool.
Yeah, 100%. In something in school, I think genuinely, I was quite honestly quite ashamed by my Indian culture. But I think when I left school, I kind of realized what makes you different, what makes you special in a way. And yeah, so now I love it. And look, all of my Australian mates really get around it. I'm really lucky. I get them over. I force them to watch Bollywood movies. So
well, it's good fun, man. It's good energy. So I don't see how anyone could hate on it. How come you used to feel ashamed when you were at school?
Look, I think on one hand as well, I think maybe looking at when I was really younger, I remember a couple of incidents when I was like year 1, year 2, 2008. I think Australia's culture as a whole has maybe become a lot more accepting, but I think it also just comes down to basic insecurity. I think I found that I was a very different person at home than I was in school. Even as simply as like when I talk to my Indian family friends, I put on a bit of an Indian accent, and in school I put on that Australian accent. I kind of felt like I was two different people. But then I kind of realized there's actually in a drama production I did in year 11 or 12 where for one of the scenes, it was during COVID, so we made a devised piece. And for one of the scenes, my teacher was like, why don't you do like a Bollywood dance? So I actually did this Bollywood dance, and it was a female Bollywood dance. And I was so scared to do it. But when I did it on the day of the performance, like everyone just loved it. And so many people came up to me afterwards and were like, that was amazing. Like, I love that you brought your culture to the school. Like, we didn't realize you had that in you. And I think that was the real click for me. And I realized, damn, like, people are actually very accepting of it. People want to know more about their culture. And honestly, from that moment on, like I never turned back. And yeah, since then it makes up such a big part of my identity and personality. So I guess I'm really grateful for that now. Yeah.
That's cool. And you are Indian, but you are Australian as well. And that's
Yeah.
cool that you were able to have that experience when you finally did that. It was nothing but love. Did you have some negative experiences before that, or what was behind your wanting to hide that part of yourself or minimize it?
I think there definitely were some negative experience. It's like one of those things, like, I guess at school, you're always going to have a bit of that bullying. There would sometimes be a few of those comments at times where, like maybe some of the more popular boys would be like, oh, mate, like I'll send you back on the next boat. And it's just like kind of stuff like that, which in hindsight, I guess I kind of look back and I can laugh about it and be like, but I think the truth is when a year 6, year 7 kid and someone says that, and I guess it still happens, it's pretty hurtful. And it's kind of those comments that stick with you. It's one of those things that you can say 9 lovely things to someone, but if you say one mean thing, that's the only thing they're going to remember. And I think, especially whilst growing up, I would always hold on to those hurtful kind of comments, and I really let it get into me. I think I talk back about the insecurities. I was kind of that kind of kid that wanted everyone to like me. I want everyone to like me, regardless of whether you're a nice person or bad person. But I don't know, I guess as you get older, and to be honest, a lot of my experience I've had since leaving school has made me realize that, like, there's this quote I always tell myself, which is if everyone likes you, you're doing something wrong. So it's kind of like you try to live authentically, and like you'll find that it's so much more comfortable to be yourself. And you'll attract the right people, the people who vibe with you, and the people who don't vibe with you will stay away from you. So,
Yeah.
that's
Amen.
my take
And
on it.
before you adopted that attitude, how did that used to shape your life? Like wanting to please everyone and wanting to fit in so badly?
I think it held me back in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways. I mean, I already talked about, like, at the start, my connection to cricket and Bollywood. When I was younger, I kind of felt like my ticket to fit in at school was to kind of embrace that cricket side. I'd always talk a lot about cricket and be like, yeah, I'd go, like, I was a huge fan of it. But I think what I actually realized was I was a lot more talented. I had a lot more passion for, like, the drama side of things, even in school, because of this mentality of I want everyone to like me. It was always weird to do drama in school. So for my early years of school, I never really got into it. I never embraced it. When I was around the cooler kids at school, I'd never talk about that side of me. And I think it held me back in many ways. I was actually really lucky though, because I had a couple of mates who'd always tell me, like, why do you care so much about what others think about you? Like, just do you. And I noticed that they were much happier than I was. And once I started to kind of embrace that and kind of be like, no, this is me, whether you like it or not, it just meant I was taking up a lot more opportunities. I was a lot less scared, whether it was something like public speaking or just taking up a new opportunity that came, like joining a new group of friends or something, just a lot more comfortable. I think when you can get out of that, from my own experience, I've seen when you can step out of that insecurity, the world is kind of open to you. Like, there's nothing that can really stop you. And it sounds a bit dramatic when I say it, but I genuinely mean it, because I think over the past few years, even the last 3-4 years, I've changed a lot, and I feel so much more comfortable in the person I am today.
Yeah, because you weren't trying to pretend to be someone for the benefit of others. You were just being yourself authentically. And I guess that's the definition of being cool and being confident, really, at the end of the day. I think, especially young people, we're trying to be cool and we're borrowing examples of other people who seem to have achieved popularity and have friends and people like them. And we say, how did they do it? And we try to take bits from here and there and mirror what other people are doing, when the truth is always, no matter who you are, if you just be yourself, even though it sounds cliche and like, what does that even mean? But if you just talk about what you're interested in and be honest and put out there into the world who you really are, and you're brave enough to do that, then that's always cool. And there's no one definition. And I think people ultimately respect that. If you're just being yourself, a lot of people want to be themselves, but might be too afraid of what the reception might be. So when we see someone who's really authentic, it always comes across well. But especially when we're younger, before we figure that out, we can be really afraid to bring that forward, because it's like, well, if I get rejected for who I really am, then I'm really screwed. But I think that there's, without fail, just being yourself, that's really the definition of cool, and people, even if you're not someone's cup of tea, they're going to admire that and admire your being yourself. And the opposite is true, I think, especially as we get older, when you can see people who are inauthentic or they're still desperately trying to be something that they're not, and it just gets more and more obvious and has the opposite effect of what people are hoping for.
100%. Completely agree with you, Callum. Yeah.
So how old were you when you first became aware of mental health? Because when you were going through some bullying and you had some difficulties around your own identity, did you know that was mental health related at the time, or how did you perceive that?
Well, look, there was always the education around mental health in school. The education started to become a lot better around it, but I think it was something that I thought would never really affect me in a certain way. Even with myself, I think in school, looking back in hindsight, I actually realized that there were actually times where I was struggling a lot, but I wasn't able to identify it. And even when you started to look at the topics around, I guess myself, I never had those thoughts around suicide. I never really felt that sense of depression. I definitely think I had a lot of anxiety when I was in school. I actually said to the GP, I think I've got like body image issues. I might have an eating disorder or something. This was later on. And he said, shut up, like eating disorders are just for girls. Like guys don't have that. So it kind of shows that there was always such a big stigma. And I remember that doctor said that to me, and I was kind of like, yeah, like what am I doing? Like am I like a woman out here? Like,
yeah.
I got to be a lot stronger than that. And it's a very unhealthy mentality. And it all changed after school when my education around mental health became a lot better. And that all really changed in 2021 when I lost one of my best mates, Michael, to suicide. And before I was talking about, my friends who would tell me to kind of be myself, like I was actually talking about my mate, Michael. I met him through my work in drama. And he was always the kind of person who just like embraced who he was and was such a lively asset on the stage. And yeah, that really changed my perception of it, because sure, there was talk around suicide, but in the same way, not to make it sound bad, in the same way you hear about those diseases that exist in like countries like India and stuff, you think, oh, well, that's never going to actually touch us. It's really sad to hear about. It's not that that's what I directly thought, but it's the way I kind of frame it to myself, that I thought the concept of suicide was something which affected a lot of people, but I just never thought it would affect us. I think a lot of us boys in my school, we were so complacent around it, thinking, oh, suicide's bad. Like, yeah, intellectually, it's a great discussion to have, but oh, surely it'll never reach us. But when it actually kind of reaches you, it just completely flips your whole life on its head.
Yeah, I think that's commonly the case, and it does take having a brush with it, either ourselves or someone we know, for that point to be drilled home and realize that it can come to our doorstep. Before that happens, especially you're a kid and you've had a mostly happy life, you don't expect that can ever happen, if you're blessed enough to have had that kind of an upbringing, because young people, especially dying really suddenly like that, and to suicide is just something that's not supposed to happen and not something that enters our minds. And for me, it was the finality of it was a real shock. And then once it happened, understanding that person wasn't going to come back and that could happen. And although that seems like an obvious thing, to actually experience it firsthand, like you, that changed my perspective. And I really hadn't thought about it as same as you. To that point, I thought, okay, that's obviously a really terrible thing, but I don't really understand it. It's not really around me. And then once it happens, that changes. Can you tell us about your friendship with Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. It really started back in year 7 and 8. I remember the first time I probably met him was at we both made it into the drama production, and we were there doing our first scene together. And he was so poor at his lines. Like, I was the kind of kid who was like, I learned half the script before the first rehearsal even came. So I felt really proud. I was out there. I was like, I'm the king. I got this. And Michael was like next to me and he just stumbled his way through the lines. Like he didn't really care that much about what was going on, but he actually got roasted by the director in that moment. And I was kind of like, oh, okay, this guy Michael, like, yeah, he's all right, maybe a bit nervous. Anyway, he comes back the next week and completely blows us out of the park, like completely blows us out of the park. And it just captured me because I was like, I was like, damn, this guy's so good. And honestly, to this day, if there's one person I wish I could just watch on stage again, it's Michael. The presence that he had was just unreal. It was just unreal. I swear half of being good at drama, especially when you're a kid, is just being able to project. But he would do so much more than that. Like he would just command the stage with his energy. And our friendship like really just grew from there, especially in year 10, I'd moved house and we started taking the same bus to school back and forth every day. And we'd always have all these great conversations. I think it's so interesting. He'd always tell me like these things about why do you care so much about what people think? You know, at our school, I went to an old boys private school. And when you're in that old boys private school, year 9, you think the most important thing, like you think what makes you a good man is how many badges you get on your blazer in year 12. And he would say to me, he'd be like, you know, one day you're going to realize that there's so much more to life than a blazer. And it's something that I guess I didn't really understand at the time, but it makes so much sense to me now. And those lessons are absolutely gold. I remember in year 10, I said to him that, Mike, when we graduate in year 12, there'd always be this huge ceremony when the year 12s graduated. I said to Mike, when we finish year 12, I'm going to lift you up in the air and be like we did. And he was much bigger than me. And we would count down those days from year 10. We'd talk about so often, be like, oh, Michael, there's only like this many days until I lift you up. Finally, we got to the end of year 12 and the day came and there's a beautiful like video that my brother took. And I literally like lifted him up. I think I like strained my lower back when I did it, but I lifted him up and I said like, Michael, we did it. And it was one of the greatest feelings ever. It's a shame that happened in November 2020, you know, and March 2021, he ended up taking his own life. And I think there's so much to the story, but I picture that moment where I'm lifting him up and it's very much the sense of we did it together. I almost feel in hindsight, it's like, yeah, I got him across the line. But I look at the stark difference from 2020 November to March 2021, and it was the exact opposite feeling. I was left with a feeling that I completely let him down. Completely let him down. Yeah, it was hard. It was really hard. To this day, it's still hard. Even saying it now, it's been a while since I've kind of properly spoken about it and lived through it again. But we had a very special friendship, and I was really looking forward to what uni would hold for both of us. You know, because we finished year 12 and literally took his own life a week into uni at the same uni together. So it also feels like the book of our friendship had so many beautiful pages. And it was almost like as the reader, it was gathering so much momentum. You're thinking, what's the next chapter going to hold? And it just feels like the rest of that book was just left empty. Like so much stuff unwritten, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I can see your love for him when you're speaking, you know, and the smile that those memories, some of those memories bring to your face. He obviously had a huge impact on your life and you his, and you can really see that love there, and it's still there. And I totally feel you when you say that it still brings those emotions to the surface when you talk about it, because even when someone's gone, that impact that they've had on you and their place in your heart, it's always there, and it can still sneak up on you when you're thinking about them or when you're talking about them. But I now 5 years on from losing my friend, when I have those moments and I feel those emotions, I just try to see it as a beautiful thing that person's still there in my heart and still part of my life. So I resonate with you in your response to talking about him, and you honor him in the way that you do that and with what you do now, man. So respect. So what was going on in the background of his life? Because he sounds like he was wise beyond his years, like he was someone who had it together. He was someone that you would want to try to be. So what was going on in the background, and how aware were you of that?
I think I was very oblivious to how much he was struggling. I think it's the case that you see with a lot of young guys and their mates. It's interesting. A lot of the work I do now, where we go to schools and talk to the boys, an interesting question I ask them is like, how often do you see girls at school crying or sharing their emotions? And the boys will be like, oh, like, you know, like every day there's They're always talking. They're always trying. But I asked that question in a really positive sense because I think it's one of the best things you can do. And I said to the boys, well, how often do you see boys crying at school? And they're like, never. And I think it's one of those things which it's obviously a massive generalization in both senses. But in school, with our friend group, we had a friend group of like 8 boys. We'd always talk about, girls and video games and sports and all this stuff, but we'd never ever talk about how we're actually doing. There would always just be piss take conversations. In fact, the way we'd show our love is by taking the piss out of one another. And I guess, for me and for our mates, we just did not realize how much he was struggling. I think in hindsight, when I spoke deeper to Mike's parents after he passed, I realized how much he was actually struggling with that sense of rejection. And to be honest, that is the truth. I think Mike struggled a lot with rejection. I think he had a few of those rejections throughout year 12. Year 12 is quite a challenging year for a lot of people. And we were just oblivious to it. And I remember coming into the start of 2021, he like got a girlfriend. And that was the other thing that, he had that relationship and that was going well. But I think that's the thing with relationships. They can make or break you, because for someone who's feeling already that sense of rejection, having someone into your life like that can be the most special thing. But unfortunately, when that all falls apart, it can end terribly. And I think there is a statistic out there around like a high percentage of youth suicides actually happen within a month of a relationship breakdown. And I think to answer very simply, when you ask, well, what was going on in the background, that bottle of emotions was filling for him. But at the start of February in 2021, him and his girlfriend broke up. And that was really the start of the massive decline. I genuinely do think that had we all been a bit more switched on, had we all really asked him what he was going through and stuff, he would have been able to come out of it. I think people often we were all quick to be like, oh, it's your first breakup. Like everyone goes through it, it's just part of life. But I think sometimes sometimes people need the push to get over it. And we really the truth, it sounds harsh, but as a friend group, we completely let him down. And that's just the truth of it. We had a massive Snapchat group together, and one day some of the boys were taking the piss out of him in a very normal way, as you do. But because he was struggling so much, for someone who is going through that, you're unable to see the jokes. It just seems like another reminder of why you're worthless and why you don't belong. And he left that Snapchat group, and none of us really thought to check up on him. We thought, he just needs a couple of days to himself. He'll come back when he's ready. But he didn't really come back until, on the 8th of Feb, it was. I remember it really well. He actually took the courage to reach out to me, and he sent me a message. And I remember that message because it actually hangs in my bedroom wall. That the lines are in there, but it was one Snapchat message where he said to me, Varad, I need to talk to someone. I just feel like shit and I don't know what to do. I don't get enjoyment out of anything anymore. And I'm so depressed. I really need help, man. I feel so alone and I don't know what to do. And that was what he said to me. It was like a 5-line message. And I look back on it in hindsight, and it's so obvious to me because in that message itself, there's like 4 or 5 signs of someone who might be having thoughts of suicide. And he expressed that he was feeling lonely. He felt like a burden. He said he felt depressed. He had said to me he just kind of wished that there was some kind of escape to get out of all this. But still, I saw that message. I still saw that message. I didn't think to ask him, are you having thoughts of suicide? Yes, of course I saw that. I was like, let me try help this guy. Michael, what's wrong? Do you want to talk about it? But I never asked him the question. And it's one of those things in hindsight, it's like, how can you miss it? How can you miss it? And I think I was lucky that he reached out to me. I think I've heard so many stories of guys losing mates and it completely blindsides them. And I think going further into the story, that's what hurts the most is that when I found out that he'd taken his own life, there's a lot to the story. But I remember I came home from a drama rehearsal. Mum and Dad were sitting it was in this room that I'm sitting in now. They were sitting here with a glass of water. And it's one of those things, I honestly thought I was going to get absolutely roasted for something I'd done. I thought, okay, Mum, Dad, my brother, all here. I've done something. I'm getting roasted. And a mum sat me down. She said, there's something we need to tell you. And she was like, Michael. And as soon as she said his name, and I kind of saw the faces of the 3 of them, I remember getting up and it just it it's kind of like you're holding onto a railing and you start to realize you're about to lose grip and you just know I'm about to lose it. And it was like that realization that I knew what she was going to say. I knew that she was going to say, Michael's taken his own life. I knew it wasn't going to be an accident or a car crash. And it all just clicked for me. Over the last month, there were all these like missing pieces. There were all these pieces scattered across the board. And it was like in that moment, it all slotted into place. And this insane feeling of like guilt and sadness just like washed over me. And I just felt like someone had come and completely punched me in the stomach. That I missed it all along. Like the story all made sense. It's like a week before that, on the 22nd of Feb, where it gets really bad for Michael is that, you know, it's a tough one because it really set the story. It really set the stage for the next 6 months. But someone in his life, you know, I'm not allowed to go into it too much, but someone in his life had accused him of doing something that he didn't do. It was like a vandalism incident on their property. And they basically spread it across social media. And that's the thing, social media is such a big weapon these days, but they spread across, what's Michael's done, this is what he's done. And it was really to make the whole friend group kind of see Michael in a bad light. And that was the final punch for him. And he came to us friends and he tried to tell us, I didn't do it, it wasn't me. But no one believed it. No one believed it. No one gave him that support. And that was the final punch because it was like, it was just another reason that like no one believes me. No one has that trust in me. And those next few days, that week that followed after that, I think he just got really let down by all of us.
So Varad, when he asked you for help, how did you respond?
When he asked me for help, I said to him, and this is what I said to him, like, oh, Mike, like, let's meet, let's chat, let's have a discussion about it. And he was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, let's meet at, there's this burger place, Toledo, down the road. And that was the thing. We decided a couple of days later that we would meet for lunch. And when it came to the time to meet, he sent me a message being like, oh, I'm not feeling that well. Like, I don't think I can make it. And I took it on face value again. And I've noticed, speaking to a lot of other guys who've lost mates, it's something that happens where sometimes people are feeling ready to get that help. But then a couple of days later, when it comes around, they're almost too scared. They're too scared that if they go into it more, they're going to be judged for it. And that was one of my biggest regrets, was that, yes, I was switched on enough to know I need to help him, but I wasn't switched on enough to know that I really need to actually get hands-on with it. And when someone is struggling, you always have to grab their hand and be like, I'm here to get you. In hindsight, I would have driven to his house, picked him up and said, come, mate, like, let's go have a chat about it. I think he'd done his part by reaching out and saying, look, I need help. I think in hindsight, yes, it's absolutely hard, but I wish I'd done more to get him that help. I feel like maybe in hindsight, I was a bit half-assed. Yeah, I was still worried about my uni stuff. I was like, oh, I'm busy Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'll see you. He said I'm a bit sick. I took it as, oh, like, actually, that's not the worst thing in the world because I've got a class this afternoon. I'll catch up with him in a few days.
But of course you did. Of course you did, though, because you'd never experienced this before. So hindsight is 2020, and you realize the situation that he was in, and you realize the role that you could have played, but you never could have known that before this tragedy happened. And it was the same with me. Like, was very close with my friend, knew he was struggling, had no idea to what extent. He didn't reach out to me before he made that decision, but I could never have guessed that that was going to happen. And then after it did, and having been in this space now for 5 years, like, now you can see it a mile away, and you know if someone's giving you even an inkling of a sign, how to follow up and how to listen, and all the things that we talk about with what we do. But if you don't have that level of mental health literacy, which you're not going to at that age, and with that level of experience, you're always going to miss stuff, and potentially these sorts of tragedies are going to happen. And then, as you and I both have experience with, you potentially blame yourself to a degree, where you think about what you could have done or said differently. And then you have to get to the point where you accept that no matter what, that's not on you, because everyone's responsible for themselves. And then you got to try to be able to get over looking back and just going around and around on how you should have done things differently. But You got to let yourself off the hook at the end of the day because you didn't know and you didn't believe that something that final and that terrible could happen to someone that you cared about. And when you look back, it can seem obvious, but that wasn't part of your reality until it became part of your reality.
Yeah. Can I ask you, Callum, like you lost your mate 5 years ago?
Yeah.
Where do you sit at with, I don't know, the level of guilt that you feel? Like,
so
yeah,
I don't feel any guilt. I certainly did for the weeks and months following, and I guess more so than just guilt, just driving myself crazy, just thinking about it over and over in your head. And of course, the fact that you can never actually get those answers because the only one who can really tell you isn't here anymore. So I think it's really hard to get past that, thinking about, why didn't they call me? Why didn't I call them? When they said this one thing, they actually meant this. And if at that time I had have acted this way, then maybe this would have happened. And that's a hamster wheel that there's no end to. And I think some people never get off it without a lot of help. I know others who've lost people close to them to suicide, and they know logically that it was not their fault whatsoever and that they're not culpable, but because they're so close to someone who's not here anymore, they really struggle to genuinely believe that. And I've got a lot of compassion for that. I mean, I've gotten to the point where I genuinely believe and accept that he was responsible for himself, that he was really mentally ill, obviously at the time that he did that he was on a track that no one else was going to get him off, that he wasn't going to allow other people to get him off, and he was there because he was so unwell, and that's not something that I could have stopped from happening, and nor was it my responsibility to do that. It was my responsibility to be his friend and show that I cared about him and love him and have those conversations and do what I did. And I guess what gives me some comfort is that I know that I did a lot of good for him as he did for me. So I've tried to focus on that element of it. But yeah, I think it's a tremendously difficult thing without necessarily a straightforward answer, where because time moves by us so fast and things happen so quickly, and one conversation or one course of action we know can make a difference. It is really hard to rationalize, okay, sure, but at the end of the day, if I had driven to his house that day and forced him to have a conversation, then it could have been different. But I think you've got to get to a point where what happened, and it wasn't on you to change what was going to take place. And that lack of control and the fact that was something terrible that happened in your life that was beyond your control and was ultimately down to someone else is the hardest part about it, because we don't have that ultimate control over others. All we can do is look out for people and be as equipped as possible to see the signs and try to help and try to look after ourselves. But ultimately, you aren't in charge of other people's lives. So I don't feel guilt about it now. I still feel emotions about it. It still brings a tear to my eye. I visited his grave at the end of February for the 5th year anniversary, and that's all still there under the surface. But given that it's 5 years later and he hasn't come back, and it's down to me who's still here to choose how that's going to impact my life, I choose to be proud of what I've done in his memory to try to help other people, and I try to use the values that he had that rubbed off on me and the traits I try to emulate in my own life and have him live on through me in that way, because we're the ones who are still here when we're bereaved by suicide, and we have to decide how we're going to hold on to that memory and what we're going to do with it. And no one else can choose that for you. And I don't think there's a right or wrong way of going about it, but we've all got to cope with it.
I really respect what you're saying. I think the mentality you got around is really good. And, I think even what I've realized in saying this today is that maybe I overestimated how much I'd come to terms with it. Because I completely agree with that that's the right way to go about it. That's the way I want to really go about it. And like, what kind of change can I now make on the back of losing Michael so that he'd be proud of me?
So
But
how do you feel about it? Where are you at with it?
that's what I think. To be honest, on underlying, there's a huge amount of guilt. To be honest, and I've actually had conversations with boys in schools who've had very similar things happen to them, who were younger than me when it happened, and they've probably said similar things to what I've said, where they've said like, it was my fault. I wasn't there. Why can I see? And I've said to them like, it's not your fault. Like, in hindsight, it all makes sense, but you did the best that you could. But to be honest, at times when I say that, I think I do feel like a bit of a hypocrite, because I think as much as I try to tell myself that I did the best I could, I think deep down there's still a huge sense of guilt. And I think, look, I'm still trying to figure it out. I'd be lying if I came on here and said, look, I got my life figured out, it's all perfect. I definitely think at times that I don't cope with it the best. But I'm trying to, and in a way, that guilt that I feel is what also drives me to want to do that change. I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's that
I
guilt or
respect
sadness.
your vulnerability there, man, and in saying that and saying that it's not perfect. And I think that's part of the message. And when we're talking about mental health and you're in schools and on this podcast, we're not saying, hey, we've got it all sorted out and we've got the answers now and we're cured. And so follow our path forward. We're still living with these things and we live with these scars. And the point is learning how to live with it and being able to look back on it and have it inform your future. Because I bet now in your dealings with people close to you, if you're seeing any kinds of those signs, you jump straight onto it and you're very aware of yourself and your own mental health. And I guess the thing is, you weren't the guy that you are now before this happened, who would have been able to deal with it differently. You know, you were a less developed, more naive, younger version of yourself by no fault of your own. That's just growing up, and you hadn't had that experience yet. And we're the sum of our experiences and who you were at the time and the stage you were at and what you'd been confronted with, that resulted in how you responded. And you could have never anticipated that it would have gone that wrong, and it's by no means your fault. And so now you can say, well, now I'm this guy who knows this much and would have responded in this way. And so I feel guilty because I didn't do that. But back then you weren't who you are now, and you are who you are now partly because of this tragedy, which is also a weird thing.
Exactly. I mean, it's our experiences that shape us, right? And yeah, absolutely. I've learned so much from that. And truthfully, yeah, without that experience, I guess I wouldn't be in the position I am now to be out there at the schools. So absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us about working with Man Up and what you do in schools, and yeah, how you feel about doing that. Because for me, it is a strange thing when losing someone to suicide and living through how devastating that is goes a long way towards shaping your purpose in life. It's an odd thing. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I absolutely love it. I mean, after Mike passed away, I think I pretty much sat at home for the next 6 months until my mate Ashwin kind of dragged me out of it and was like, come join. I think you're ready to kind of like, to give back. And I really wanted to do that. And yeah, this organization that I found, Man Up, I think it's one of the most unique, amazing organizations. I mean, we're a bunch of like uni-aged volunteers, all with our own kind of lived experience backgrounds. And we go around to schools right now across WA, so Perth Metro, but from Esperance all the way up to the Pilbara. And we talk to the boys around mental health and masculinity. So there are kind of two main statistics that laid the ground for this organization. And one is that, 80% of suicides in Australia are men. And the second one is that 1 in 3 women have or will face some form of sexual violence in their life. So we kind of have 3 different sessions that we run: the culture, relationships, and coping. And they kind of cover all these topics. But it's been amazing, because I think normally you have incursions at schools where people will come and with like a big presentation, speak to a whole cohort. But the beauty of this is like we have smaller groups. And I think what makes our content special isn't the fact that it's not the content itself, or it's not the point of view that, look, we're all perfect guys, we're the perfect role model, look at us and be like us. In fact, what makes it special is that we go in and we share our stories with them. And I think one of the key differences is that we tell them, like we tell these young year 9, year 10 boys that it's okay to not be perfect. We spend more time talking about our failures and our successes. And I think it's something that the boys can relate to a lot. I think it takes the pressure off them. I think in a society that we live in, I think, yes, a lot of men need to take a lot of accountability for the way we go about it in society, like especially when we look at some of the sexual violence statistics and suicide statistics. But I think there needs to be sometimes a greater level of empathy. I think some of these younger boys in high school feel like they don't really have a place in society. They feel like they're always antagonized. So it's not about victimizing them, but it's about kind of getting their honest thoughts. I mean, we sit in sessions sometimes and you'll have boys be like honestly, like these boys who don't want to know the first thing about us when we walk in. They're like, oh, sir, like, yeah, I'm not really allowed to swear on the podcast, I don't think, but they'll say all sorts of stuff about what we're doing. And I'll ask them, like, we'll ask them, what are your honest thoughts about mental health? And they'll be like, oh, like, sir, like, I reckon, like, if you like have mental health, then like you're just like you failed the test of life. Like you deserve to die. And it's like there's two ways of responding to that. And one is to like completely like shit on them for it and be like, that's such a bad mentality. Like have some kind of empathy for the people around you. But the other side is to kind of hear them out. You know, when these boys say that like, oh yeah, like gay people like suck and stuff, it's like, it's actually so much better to hear them out. Well, why do you think that? Why do you think that they failed the test of life? And by kind of giving the boys a chance to say their thoughts out loud and hear their mates speak, you're actually so much more likely to get them to see your point of view. And it works really well. The best sessions we run at Man Up are when we're no longer speaking and it's just the boys having a discussion, and they'll start arguing over like the LGBTQI plus community, or they'll start arguing around mental health and they'll start to see each other's point of views. And I think that's the best form of education. But for these young guys, their mate telling them something, whether good or bad, is going to have a much larger influence on them than what their teacher says. You know,
Yeah,
it's your mates
and I
around
suppose
you
at that point, once they're having
behave.
those discussions, they're actually thinking about what they actually think and why, and then saying what they think rather than just reiterating what they've heard from their parents
Exactly.
or from social media influencers or whatever it is, where you might say an opinion, but that's not really based on much because you haven't really thought about it. And I think being able to reflect in a group and talk about why do you actually think that and where's that coming from, and consider other points of view is absolutely fundamental to raising healthy young men who are going to question why they think a certain way and actually think about it critically. That's so important. So that's great that that's what you guys do. And I believe it's all evidence-based as well. So you actually know what you're talking about, which is great too, because that's important.
Absolutely. It is. It is all evidence-based, because the other things, I guess the other side of it is you have to be careful when you're going into schools and talking about some of these topics, especially when, you know, family domestic violence comes up. There are a lot of these topics that can be quite triggering for the young guys. But that's also a big part of what we do, getting the boys to open up. And it's amazing that when these boys do open up, like you see these big rugby boys out in the country sitting there, never having spoken about their emotions out loud. And all it takes is one of them to open up in our sharing session. And it just starts this domino effect. And suddenly you got a room of all these boys in tears. And it's amazing to see that social hierarchy completely fall apart, but in the most beautiful way possible. I mean, sessions where it's lunchtime and these boys are like, nah, we don't want to go for lunch. We want to sit here and talk, and have their mates put their hand on their leg and be like, mate, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were going through that.
Yeah.
I feel like for me, like you asked, like, how do I feel having this drive so much of my life? I think for me and a lot of the other volunteers, those are the moments that make it special. That's when you kind of feel like we are making a change. Because when I was in school, our mates never saw each other cry. We never put our hand on each other and said, I'm really sorry to know that. So it kind of does feel like you are making a step forward, no matter how big or small.
Yeah, and they're all feeling it. It's all there under the surface. They've got stuff going on at home. They've got stuff going on with what they see in the mirror, and how they're failing themselves in their own minds, and creating an environment where they can actually talk about it, well, potentially changes their life and allows them to be actually honest, and then end up being better friends too, because you can actually get closer because you're not just putting up a front. And I think that's so valuable for boys who are so young, when they're right in the midst of having that wall up and the bravado's at its highest, because we're all out trying to deliver what we think we should be to others, and potentially hurting other people in the process. So yeah, that's great that you're out doing that in the way that you are. I'm sure it's having a really positive impact. And talk about Right By You as well.
Working through Man Up also gave a great opportunity to work with Nehemiah National and creating this new suicide prevention website called Right By You. So, we kind of worked on it for over a year and it launched basically a year ago. But essentially, it's like an online resource, which kind of, I guess, for young people who are struggling or worried about their friends, we often say, go get help, speak to a trusted adult, speak to a GP. But the truth is a lot of the kids are always going to go on Google and search up. And often when you search up stuff on Google, it's not the most helpful. It just gives you a list of 20 different things, different articles written by different people, no evidence behind it. So I think that's the really good thing about this website. It kind of brings the best, most important online resources and help centers into like one website. And like I said before about when you've got a friend who's like struggling and it's important to kind of grab their hand and step them through, I think this website, Right By You, does that really well. I mean, right from the start, I mean, the first tab is like an emergency tab and it actually goes through what you can do if you are genuinely worried about your friend. People don't realize that you can actually call 000. People are so worried, the young kids think, well, if I call 000, I'm going to get in trouble from the police or I'm going to get a fine for the ambulance. But it kind of lays it out really well. So it's a great website, right from the emergency to what you can do for yourself. It goes into other really important topics around like financial stress, relationship breakdown, image abuse, which is now becoming a huge issue, especially amongst like the youth with all these software editing stuff. So it's a really powerful resource and it's one that we recommend a lot at Man Up. So
what is
it's something
the website?
That we're trying to spend it's called Right By You. So www.rightbyu.org.au. It has a big focus on, youth expressing thoughts of suicide in an online format. So it's something that's really relevant, something which a lot of the youth can relate to. And yeah, Callum, I definitely think you should check out the website because
I have had a look at it and I like how streamlined and obvious it is. Like you wouldn't have to search around much to find what you're looking for. And I guess that's the point when we're talking about this stuff where there's such a vast array of sources out there and who knows what's where and what we actually need. And that website just puts it all there for you. So it's like a really easy way of accessing that stuff, which I think especially for kids who maybe they're just going to look up one website and if it doesn't give them what they need straight away, maybe give up. It's great to have a resource like that. So definitely check it out. If you'd had that,
Absolutely.
If you'd had that years ago in 2021, do you think it would have made a difference?
I definitely think it would have. And I was lucky to be part of that process of like helping design what sort of content should go on there. And definitely I brought a lot of my own personal experience to that. I think having that website, having that step-by-step of what to do to help a mate would have given me a lot more peace of mind, would have given me a lot more direction moving forward. So I really hope that it will help people. I hope it already has. I mean, it's already had like 40,000 clicks on it since it first started. So, I mean, I guess you just really hope that it has helped someone out there because it's something which I wish I'd seen before losing Michael. But hopefully, I guess we don't lose more Michaels. I think that's it. Same with all. Like same for you. I'm sure the aim is like you don't want to see someone else lose a mate like you lost your mate. You don't want to lose another one of your mates. So I guess we all just got to try to do what we can and talk about these topics to help the future, I guess.
Yeah, and I think you're doing that with young kids and your own friendship group. I think you're not going to take away the banter and the fun stuff and the how Aussie men and boys are with each other. And to a large extent, there's not a problem with that, but it's just about educating people so that when they're in a circumstance like you, where someone drops out of a Snapchat group or they seem like they're off for weeks at a time or whatever it is, someone is equipped enough to be able to step up and go over to their house or like really be able to be there for them and hold space for them to hopefully get them through that period. And I guess it's trying to equip people and educate people to be that person in their own family, a sports club or friendship group, and not change who they are, but just say like, when this comes up, because it does come up so commonly in our lives, know what to look out for and be able to respond so that you don't end up with a tragedy and then years later have to look back and talk about what you could have done differently if you'd known. I mean, if we are giving people the skills and the knowledge to know now, then that means that they can do it from now, which is the outcome that we're looking for. So you said you still carry a lot of guilt over your friend, yet you've done all this work, you volunteer in this space, you help a lot of young men and boys who are still here, who are going to lead better lives, partly because you've had an impact on them. So how were you able to cope with Michael's death? Like, what has helped you? And aside from the guilt, is there another element to how you see all that now?
Honestly, I was really lucky right up until this day, but right from the start, that I had a really strong support system around me. And I honestly think one of the best things is just talking about it. Talking about it. It's something like suicide. It creates such a big ripple effect in the whole community. So many people are touched by it in so many different ways. And it was really nice for me, I think, to be able to talk to different mates about it. Boys that knew Michael really well, boys that didn't, some of my family friends. And I started to notice that the more you talk about it, you start to have conversations with people in a cafe. It would be like, he would tell you a story about someone they lost as well. I think it really helped me a lot, like being able to relate to other people who had gone through the same loss. Because aside from the guilt, there was definitely a lot of anger, to be honest. I think a lot of anger that was within me, and I think that's another side of it, that with guys, when that anger builds up and you don't talk about it, it can lead to some pretty unhealthy habits. And I genuinely did have some of those unhealthy habits. There was genuinely a bit of a period where I was just resorting a bit to alcohol for a while, and it just kind of set me down a really bad track. But that's why I think, honestly, the simplest thing is being able to talk about it. I was really lucky that I had that. And in the same way that you said about you trying to like live with your mate's memory, I think one of my biggest takeaways was that I almost tried to live for Michael. And what I said at the start about being a lot more secure in myself and not caring about what others think, it's all from Michael. I try to tell myself that he's the one that taught me that. So alongside all this, I really think that it's a strange way to say it, but I almost think Michael did more for me after passing away than he did before. Like the stuff that he would say to me really clicked with me after he passed away. So I really do every day try to kind of take that into my life. And like you said with your mate, sure, like Michael's not here, but he's also here at the same time. Like he lives within me. There are times where I'm walking on the street by myself or in my room, and I'll ask myself, like, it's almost weird. I never feel alone. I always feel like he's in the back of my head. So as much pain that has come from losing Michael, I feel like there's so much that's come from it. There's so much beauty that's come from it. There's so much I've learned, and I think he'd be proud, I'd hope, of the perspective that I've got moving forward.
Beautifully said, man. That's I agree that he absolutely would be proud of who you are now, and you should be as well. And you've gone and created so much good out of what's happened to you, and that's not on anyone to do that after a tragedy, but it's something that's given your life purpose, and you've been able to help so many others because of that, and will continue to. So yeah, I'm sure he would be proud, and he'd want you to forgive yourself and to know that it wasn't you who did anything wrong or could have done anything differently, because you were who you were at that stage, and just a boy, and you've grown into a man now, and will make the right decisions going forward for yourself and for others, and be an example and a leader. So yeah, just be proud of yourself, man. And it's a privilege to talk to you and hear your perspective, and yeah, power to you for what you do. Keep doing it.
Thanks, Cam. And I just want to say, like, a massive thank you to you as well. I think the work that you're doing, like, even with this podcast itself, is awesome. Like, I feel very lucky that I get the opportunity to talk about my story and talk about Michael's story and spread that message around. So same back to you, man. Thanks. Genuinely, thank you so much for the work you're doing. I know it's already helping me, so I'm sure it's helping many others.
Thanks, brother. My pleasure.
That's it for this episode. If you like what we're all about, support us by following Young Blood Men's Mental Health on Instagram and Young Blood Mental Health on TikTok. Every podcast episode is recorded in professional quality video, and they're all up on our Young Blood Men's Mental Health YouTube channel. So please show some love and subscribe. Thanks to our local business supporters, NB&A Group and Pro Realty Property Consultants. You can find everything there is to know about the podcast at youngbloodmensmentalhealth.com. And most importantly, please share these stories with anyone in your life who needs to know they're not alone. We're all in this together. Catch you next time.